Welcome back to ReadingBear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, "Fiancé left me due to my cancer diagnosis. I left her destitute. This has been 4 years ago, so the sting is gone and my revenge has been had. We dated for 4 years and had what I thought was a great relationship. We were both well-established professionals who both own homes in the same neighborhood and both with daughters in the home. Her daughter was 11 and mine was 16 when we met. We had actually planned to get married, build a house, and raise the two together. We planned the house build because she had recently been diagnosed with a neurological disease that would eventually put her in a wheelchair, and needs something ADA-friendly. During the planning stages, I began doing landscape and construction projects on her home to increase the resale value. All in, I invested roughly $30,000 USD into the home, running everything through my side construction business for tax, permitting, and resale purposes. We had a contract that payment would be made upon the sale of the home. I produced invoices for each and every project, but never pushed for payment because of the prior agreement. Fast forward 6 months, we're looking at property to develop and finalizing drawings on the home when I began feeling ill. I couldn't eat, constantly vomiting and passing blood. I began noticing that my abdomen looked swollen, which was odd because we were both very clean eaters and were in the gym every day. So I went to the doctor and began having tests done. During this time, she began having small cognitive issues, and the stress of her current position was exacerbating her condition, so she took a $20,000 per annum cut in pay along with a lesser position inside the company. After a month or so of different tests, and a biopsy, it came back that I had a golf ball-sized tumor in my stomach, and would need to begin chemotherapy. So I began chemo and radiation treatments, which made me, expectedly so, extremely ill. She was spending time helping around my place on the weekends and staying over more, to the point that they were both at my home, more than theirs. At this point, I suggested that we go ahead and put one of our houses on the market, and move in together until the new house was built. I have great supplemental insurance as well as a long-term illness plan, so using that coupled with the sale of one of our houses would push us through comfortably, and help ease the financial stress on her. Shortly after this discussion, she became extremely distant. Her daughter wasn't coming down and hanging out with mine anymore, she had excuses for not getting together. She quit driving me to treatments and stopped staying over. She then dropped a bomb. A sentence that will forever be burned into my psyche: "I love you, but I can't see myself taking care of someone this sick in the long term, and I don't think we should see each other any longer." In a text. It broke me. I won't lie. This was the first woman I had ever opened up to and planned a life with since my wife died when my children were 1 and 3. However, I tried to be mature about it. I forced myself to understand her position and to accept what I could not change. I calmly, the next day, gathered all of her things, packed them neatly, loaded them in my truck, and took them to her house to leave on the back porch while she was at work, in order to avoid any awkward exchanges. Walking around the back and under the porch cover, I sat down a box, and saw her in her back living room, on the couch having sex with a man that she had introduced to me as a lifelong friend. I had dinner and drinks with this man and his girlfriend. We had gone on vacation with them, as well. I never spoke of the incident with her, and simply sent her a text later, explaining that I would leave her things on my side porch to pick up at her convenience. I discovered 8 or 9 months later from his now ex-girlfriend, that they had broken up due to him confessing that he had been sleeping with my SO, dating back to about the time we were finishing drawings on the new home. Now I'm upset. Revenge time. At this point, I had finished chemo and radiation for the time being and was feeling healthier. I was going through some much neglected paperwork when I ran across the file that contained $32,680 in unpaid, long overdue invoices, which were promptly sent to my attorney to begin lien proceedings on the home. It turns out that I couldn't have done this a moment too soon because she was set to put her house on the market. Coupled with interest over the course of, what was then, 19 months overdue, the invoices were hefty. That, along with the agreement of settling them when the house was sold and attorney fees, left her with roughly $10,000 after the sale of the home and settling her current mortgage. She promptly had to back out of the purchase of another home and moved in with her oldest daughter, Sil, and 2 grandchildren. She also had to leave her job and begin receiving disability. I ran into her a little over a year ago, and she looked as if she had aged 20 years, and was in the wheelchair we had talked about. We chatted cordially but briefly and I excused myself and went on with my day. A few days later, her younger daughter called me and spoke of my running into her mum, and could we hang out sometime. I gave a vague answer, thanked her for calling and again, went on with my day. The ex then called me a week or so later, and began apologizing for leaving me as she did. Again, cordial but short, I thanked her for calling and hung up. She began texting and this went on for several weeks until she asked if I could ever see us rekindling what we had, to which I replied, I can't see myself taking care of someone so sick in the long term. Remember the box on your back porch? Did you think that lifelong friend brought that over to you from my house? Good luck to you. Goodbye. I sometimes feel guilt over this, but not much, and not often. The next one is titled, Just Cleaning My Weapons. This is from about 40 years ago, and it's not my story, but my fellow soldiers. I was in an infantry battalion, and from time to time we had to go away for days at a time for training, even sometimes out of state, where we would get wet, dirty and very tired. It was a lot of fun for rough and tough young men, but many of us were married, and would be anxious to get back home to our wives and children. This is about my fellow squad leader, whom I will call Sergeant Jack. Jack was not too tall, but he was pretty tough. He was also a really nice guy, and easy to work with. His squad members really liked him and he got along well with our superiors as well. He was married with 2 children. His wife was a very short and sweet young lady, not very imposing, but cute as a bug in a rug, his kids as well. He was very protective of them all, and the other members of our platoon liked them all a lot. One time after we got back from several days field training, Jack went home to find his wife worried sick. Apparently, the man who lived across the street from him had gotten drunk a couple of times while Jack was in the field, and on those nights had come over to Jack's house and tried to get his wife to let him in. In his liquored-up state he talked to her through the closed door, telling her that he was there to make her happy while her husband was out of town, and when she wouldn't let him in, pounded and kicked on the door calling her all kinds of ugly names. She was petrified, but didn't want to call the police for fear that they wouldn't believe her and also get the drunk neighbor mad, while Jack was still out in the field. When Jack finally came home on the Friday, she told him all about it, and Jack immediately went across the street to confront the neighbor. He knew they were home because he saw the living room curtain move, but nobody came to the door. On Monday he came to work and in the course of the day told me and the other squad leader about it, and we were upset, not only because we liked Jack and his family, but also because our families were in similar situations when we were off training, and really knew what it could feel like. So we volunteered to help Jack teach his neighbor a lesson, and came up with some pretty outlandish and dangerous things to do about it. But Jack said that it was stupid to get in trouble for this, and that he knew what to do. And this is what he did. Each night during that week, Jack came home from work, opened the living room curtain, and right on the coffee table, in full view of, and facing the neighbor's house across the street, he would clean one or more of his guns. Being from a part of the country in which gun ownership was very prevalent, Jack owned a couple of rifles, a shotgun and a pistol or 2, not the weapons he was assigned by the army, which of course stayed on post. So each evening he spent a good hour or 2 working with each of these guns, and as he finished cleaning them, he would take aim at the neighbor's house a few times, while playing with the sights, pretending to adjust them. And the neighbors saw what he was doing. This went on for a whole week, and during the day when Jack's wife would see the wife of the neighbor come out of the house to go shopping or whatever, she would always keep a nervous eye on Jack's house. They were clearly spooked. And then, without warning, over the next weekend the neighbors moved out. Problem solved, and no one was hurt. This was psychological warfare at its finest. The next one is titled, Mean Teacher and the Notebook Drama. I had a teacher in middle school that was just a rude, mean lady. She was extremely bossy. It was her way or no way at all. She made us get a composition notebook to write all assignments and notes in it for her class with a table of contents in front showing what assignments and notes are on what page. Now don't get me wrong, I understand that some teachers want all their stuff in one folder or binder or notebook or whatever. But in her case it was just her need to be bossy and make things complicated for the students. Because all of our assignments and notes were in one composition notebook, we had to tear out some pages to turn them into her to grade, then she would have us staple them back into the notebook. It was horrible and you couldn't really study it because it was just a mess. Some people asked why we couldn't use a folder or a binder instead of this notebook, but the teacher said she liked the notebooks, so we had to use them for her class. Now I just want to say that I'm one of those people that like to have clean notes and organized stuff. If my notes are not organized and neat, I have no motivation at all to study them or go over them or anything. Basically, I would just write them down and never look them again if they were messy. Because we had to use the notebook and I still wanted to get good grades, I made copies of every assignment and notes and put them in a separate binder for me to use, study. It was a little tedious to make copies of everything in her class, but it was the only solution I had to the problem. My teacher eventually found out and scolded me for trying to get around her rules. I tried to explain that I wanted to do this so that I would have the motivation to study. I guess she got offended that her notebook was not motivation enough. She made a big deal about it and called my parents and a meeting with the principal to discuss my rude behavior. She lied and said I was disruptive in class and didn't want to follow the rules. My parents tried to argue with her because I was a shy, quiet kid. But principal sided with the teacher, not us, which I was not surprised by because my school's snooty and would turn a blind eye to a lot of things. I got a write-up and had to agree to follow the teacher's rules. So I did. I stopped making copies and using my binder. My good grades started falling further and further. Another meeting with my parents and the principal was called to talk about my bad grades. I explained my reasoning and the situation with the notebook. The teacher argued, saying that I was probably autistic and a retard. Yes, she did actually use that word and language. No, I am not autistic or anything like that. The principal reprimanded her for using that type of language. This time the principal actually listened to me. An investigation into the teacher and her classes began. During the next couple of weeks, other teachers and administrators would visit the classroom on and off. In the first few days my teacher acted nice and was the perfect teacher, but I guess the act was too much for her and she started showing her true colors. By the end of the investigation, it was proven that most of the students, if not all of them, were having problems in her class, mostly because of her notebook. She was forced to stop making us use the notebook and let us take notes and do assignments like any other class. I still had problems with that teacher the whole time in middle school. Even if I wasn't in her class anymore, she would see me in the halls and give me a mean, nasty look. The next one is titled, Pro Revenge by Whistleblowing. One of my first jobs out of college wasn't really a true job. I interviewed at a proprietary trading firm and was offered a job as one of their traders. Looking back, it was naive to join such a firm, and this was right before the '08 crash. They sold themselves as being pro traders, and all you had to do was put up some capital which got added to the group's pooled fund. After that, you went through training, and once the boss thought you were ready, you would go live with your trading account. There were no paychecks, but you did get to keep most of your profits. Later on, I learned that the bosses of such groups made money by either taking a cut from your profits or by taking a fee from your traded volume. This group skimmed from both sides, taking 15% from your profits and a fee from your trading volume, which came out to about $1.50 every 100 shares traded. For months, I spent time learning from the pros, and then I began to realize, along with some of the other newbies, that the only person making money was the boss. The turnover for new traders was high. Some people lasted a month, others a year or two. As I got to know people around the office, I began finding out that very few made any money at all. The boss was a micromanager and watched the risk monitor for his group like a hawk. If you hit $50 in a day, you were locked out and couldn't trade anymore throughout the day. Also, you were limited to trading stocks up to $40 per share with a max size of 200 shares. It was very difficult to make a living trading like this. Here is where things get interesting. The boss took a liking to me at first because I was tech-savvy. They had a large computer lab with many trading groups and about 1,000 workstations set up for trading. The group I was in had maybe 35 to 40 traders. The floor was staffed with 2 IT techs. Needless to say, if there was a tech problem, it took a while for your support ticket to get answered. So, instead of waiting, I just hacked the network and got the domain admin credentials back in the days of XP and Server 2K3. I then proceeded to add my account to the local admins group on my PC at the office. In turn, I was able to install updates, patches, different trading software, and more. The IT staff never knew, and the boss liked how I got around the system and gave me an additional role as the unofficial IT guy for our group. This exposed me to the boss's PC as well as all of the other traders. Doing the unofficial IT work, I ended up meeting everyone in the group. As I became friends with some of the more seasoned traders, I found out that most were surviving by receiving a commission for signing up new traders and not from trading. New traders would put $3.10k down, and after the training class, they'd go live. A small portion of that went to the employee that recruited the trader. One guy, let's call him Trader X, who had been there the longest, started telling me all about the boss, and I began to understand how shady this whole operation was. Having access to the boss's PC when he asked me to help with some basic tasks, Trader X stopped by and coerced me into doing some digging. The boss was gone, and we found a lot of shady documents relating to the company. The boss had an alternate identity, bank accounts in another name, IDs with his picture and different info. It was all very suspicious. Shortly after that day of digging, he entrusted me to bring an envelope with some documents to the bank for him, and I did. Although, when I met with the banker about the documents I was dropping off, she used the other name Trader X, and I found on the boss's PC. When I mentioned the name I knew, the banker had no idea who I was talking about. Soon after realizing it was a sketchy place to be working at, and seeing my fellow traders drop like flies due to the trading restrictions, I came across one of the boss's emails to an unknown part that went into detail about how to properly sign up traders and bleed their accounts dry for the maximum profit. I'm oversimplifying it here, but this got to me and I went home ticked off. Trader X and I talked about it, and he confirmed that this was the boss's modus operandi. Collect the training fee, have the trader sign the contract with the group, and cycle them out as fast as possible. So that night, I went home and wrote up a post on a trading forum about the group, its practices, and warned anyone looking at joining the group to steer clear. I went to bed and thought nothing more of the post until the next day. The next morning, when I arrived in the office, everyone was being held in the conference room. We were all getting interrogated about a post that was found online about our group. Shit. It was my post. I remained calm, and when it was my turn, I just remember thinking to myself, never underestimate the power of denial. When asked if I had any knowledge of anything posted online, I said that I did not. Suspicion was there, but it got dropped after I was threatened with an empty threat that if I did know anything, I was in breach of the contract I signed that stated that I could be sued for damages up to $100,000. I didn't buckle under the pressure and maintained that I didn't know anything. After a few days, things cooled off and I was asked to stay late to work on the boss's PC again. This time, I pulled a copy of all the boss's emails and saved it to a flash drive. When reviewing what I took, and knowing that this was a fly-by-night sort of operation going on, I packaged it up and sent the PST file to the SEC via an anonymous email address. I then reached out to all of the traders I had known that left and were swindled out their money and urged them to submit complaints, tips to the SEC about the trading group. All in all, I think about 20 complaints were sent out through my efforts. When I looped in Trader X about everything I had done, he jumped in and got more people from before my time, starting with the group, to submit complaints. Now it was time for my exit. I wanted to be done with this group. I contacted the boss and informed him I wanted my money back, and based on my calculations, I should be flat overall with my account. I made nothing and lost nothing since I had started. The boss over the phone tried to inform me that I signed a contract, and according to that contract, the money was no longer mine. To his surprise, I told him he was wrong and that I actually had a copy of his contract. I then proceeded to read off the sections that clearly stated that the money provided was for training purposes and would only be kept by the company if losses were not paid back to the company. He was surprised I was able to read this off to him because all copies of this contract were only available to the traders the day they signed with the group. He never provided a copy for your own records, and clearly did so because he did not want you to fully understand what you signed or have you scrutinize over it with a lawyer. Once I explained my logic of how my account was flat and that my capital contribution should be fully refundable based on the wording of the contract, his response to me was, "The contract isn't open to interpretation." I responded by saying, "You think your contract isn't open for interpretation? Are you kidding? The Constitution is open to interpretation. What makes you think your contract is set in stone?" He proceeded by threatening me with the clause regarding the $100,000 in damages and claimed he had proof I posted online about him and his group. I told him I'd gladly meet him in court. I knew he wouldn't want to go to court and I called his bluff. A few days later I received a check for the money I initially put up to join the group. What makes this qualify as pro-revenge was that during the market crashing in 2008, the office where the group operated out of got a visit from the SEC about 3 weeks after all the complaints were received. Trader X informed me that the boss was pulled into meetings with investigators from the SEC, and a few days after their arrival, the boss was gone and the group dissolved. Since there were many other trading groups sharing the floor, anyone left over was given the option to get their money back or to join another group on the floor. The last I heard about the boss was that a few years after the whole SEC investigation, the parent company was investigated. They ended up changing business names and downsized significantly. As for my old boss, he moved out of the country after a few failed business endeavors. It was pretty sweet how everything played out, and I was glad that most of the traders I was there with got their money back. In the end, some of the traders who knew the full story referred to me as the whistleblower of the group, but in a good way. The last one is titled, "Have Fun with Your $2 million Paperweight." This is a story from my mum when she used to work for her dad's company. The year is 2004. My grandfather on my mum's side was a physicist and had developed a way of making these machines that made silicon wafers that were used in making microchips. Back then it was breaking-edge technology in the microchip field. My grandfather's company made the machines that made these wafers in a way that no other companies could. Anyway, my mum handles orders of these machines. She managed the company back then with my grandmother. One machine in particular was supposed to go to this one technology company based in Korea. They had purchased a machine that made one specific kind of chip. That machine was worth $2 million, so there was lots of communication obviously on the machine's exact specifications. Well, the communication director for the Korean company was this preppy little shitwheel called SH, shithead. SH gives my mum's company the exact specifications for the machine and a down payment of $500K or so to make the machine. So the company makes the machine and ships it to Korea with an engineer to set it up when they get there. At 3 o'clock in the morning, my mum gets a call from SH. In bad English, he basically tells my mum that we needed to include some feature with it that he claimed he asked for, but did not, or he's not sending out the rest of the $1.5 million. My mum is confused at first, then asks to speak with his manager. He keeps saying no. So then she asks if she's on speakerphone and if the engineer, Glenn, is in the room. The answer is yes to both. She then tells Glenn to put the machine to sleep and get on the next flight home. Putting the machine to sleep basically makes it inert, as you may have guessed. Only our engineers could turn the machine back on again. She then asks if Glenn understood her and Glenn says yes. Then she hears some hushed talking. Glenn later tells her that another Korean guy was asking SH if SH knew what my mum said. SH did not. The other Korean guy tells SH and SH starts to yell at my mum. My mum hangs up. 20 minutes later the phone rings again. It's SH's manager. SH has been fired after the machine was put to sleep and Glenn left the building. Glenn was almost at the airport when my mum called him, explained and told him to go back. The $1.5 million was released and all ended well. Except for SH. Thanks for listening.